Just when we thought we were making a little bit of progress and getting clarity after the Chequers white paper was published in relation to Britain's stance in their next phase of negotiations with the EU on Brexit, last night the British Parliament in Westminster saw Theresa May survive a series of votes after her government bowed to pressure from Tory Eurosceptics who demanded 4 amendments to the government's customs bill. It wasn't without casualties on the other side, with 14 Tory Remain rebels voting against the government. A minister resigned, and perhaps the biggest casualty of all will end up being a soft Brexit and a frictionless border, for which we depend so much, as set out in the joint agreement of the 15th of December on the backstop. Well, one person who has very strong views in relation to Sinn Féin's absence from, because obviously they have 7 MPs, they have an abstentions policy, and therefore they could have made the difference on some of these softer Brexit key votes. Pleasure to welcome to the programme the leader of Fianna Fáil, leader of the opposition, Micheal Martin. First of all, how concerned are you by these votes, Micheal?
I would be very concerned, Ivan, about the votes themselves and also the pattern that they may now set. In other words, clearly the Westminster Parliament is going to have continuing influence both over the negotiating platform that the British government will have with the European Union and also the outcome of that negotiation process. So the European Union, on one hand, will have significant difficulty in ascertaining, what is the true negotiating position of the British government, and to what degree is it now susceptible, if you like, to significant amendment even after the negotiations are concluded, because Parliament will have a role. And therefore, it does change the goalposts, I think, significantly in terms of the process, in terms of how Brexit is going to be sorted, and it increases the risk of a hard Brexit overall, and significantly of a hard border between North and South. And a hard Brexit is bad for Ireland, it's bad for Britain, it's bad for the European Union. But the island of Ireland as a whole stands to lose the most in terms of our exports to the British market if it's a hard Brexit. And that will affect agriculture, the food industry, small, medium-sized companies that export significantly to the British market on the east-west axis. And that's a matter of real concern. And there is a real danger of a disorderly, incoherent Brexit emerging.
And what's your assessment of the value of this joint agreement, paragraph 49, which sets out, in the event of a no deal, that we will have a frictionless north-south border, and Britain have signed up to that? Sure, do you not think that's not what the paper's written on?
Well, I think the British government, the Irish government and the European Union all say we want a frictionless border. But you know and I know, if the backstop is all that we have left to play with at the end, that means a sour ending to whatever negotiations would have been taking place. And that's a bad ending, Ivan. And that means the east-west axis, which is very important as well, would bear the brunt in terms of exports to Britain if it's a hard Brexit. And that affects the North, it affects the Republic. And that's the issue. I think if we end up with a hard, with the backstop, that means the negotiations will have been a failure. And I think that's something that has perhaps been missed all along. But I do think that it is regrettable that we are where we are here in terms of the hardline Brexiteers wielding their influence and essentially restricting the room for manoeuvre of Theresa May, the British Prime Minister, who has been endeavouring to chart a way forward. And we all thought the Chequers statement was the beginning of a move towards a softer Brexit, which is ultimately in the interest of the people living on the island of Ireland.
Now, let's move on to Sinn Féin. I have a text here. The DUP threw Irish nationalists under a bus last night. Sinn Féin stood idly by because it's never what's best for the nation, it's always what's best for Sinn Féin, and they thrive on chaos. You have been fairly visceral in consistently over Sinn Féin's abstentionist policy, but in fairness to them, this was an electoral promise they have consistently made. And they're saying they're honour bound to preserve that. They don't want to take the oath to the Queen. This is a long-standing core value for them. Not easily dismissed, Micheal.
Yeah, but my point here is that they shouldn't have contested the election if they weren't going to take their seats, particularly in the light of the most significant generational issue to have affected the island of Ireland, such as Brexit. So given the enormity of Brexit, the enormity of the potential impact on people's lives, on jobs, on income, on economic growth, they should have stood aside and left others in the nationalist community and in the anti-Brexit majority of Northern Ireland who would have taken their seats to go to Westminster and influence deliberations there. And as I said in comments this morning in the tweet, that if the SDLP candidates like Margaret Ritchie and Mark Durkin and Alistair MacDonald had taken their seats, they'd have contributed to defeating at least one of those motions, and they'd have worked with others on the Westminster benches. But Sinn Féin went for election, contested areas where the SDLP were contesting, splitting votes and so on like that, and in essence, in my view, creating a situation where the anti-Brexit majority have no influence. That's the people of Northern Ireland who voted against Brexit, have no influence at Westminster, which we now know will be influencing the outcome. It's not enough to say it's just the British government, the Irish government, the EU. Westminster is going to influence, to a certain degree, what happens with the eventual Brexit negotiations and outcome. And I think Sinn Féin should have stood aside. If what's the point in getting elected, taking the salary? They take the Queen's shilling, but they're not prepared to take the seats, which could influence the outcome of events. And certainly the SDLP and others who are against Brexit could have helped to stop the influence of the hard-line Brexiteers who want a crash-out Brexit, who want to just have a Brexit with no, with no conditions attached from a British point of view, which would be ruinous for Irish trade and Irish business and Irish jobs. That's the point. This is a very serious issue. It's not politics as normal. And I think the abstention is negative, and it is not in the best interests of the Irish people at this point in time. And likewise, we've no Northern Assembly either. We've no Northern Executive. Again, the anti-Brexit majority in Northern Ireland being denied a parliamentary forum where their views could be articulated. I think it's quite a shocking state of affairs given the enormity of Brexit itself.